This brings us finally to the last part of the methods of manipulation, and the last one is the biggest of them all, chaos sorcery. What has been known as the Hegelian dialectic, or problem, reaction, solution. And we're going to talk about what the Hegelian dialectic is, and we're going to see an example of how this is put into action when we analyze the 9/11 occult ritual. The Hegelian dialectic is what chaos sorcery really is, and this is an ideology that was formulated by George Hegel, a German philosopher. The Hegelian dialectic is a framework for guiding our thoughts and actions into conflicts that lead to a predetermined solution. So the solution is already predetermined before anything happens. The people who are putting this into effect want a certain outcome. This is outcome-based framework, an outcome-based framework. It's saying this must occur. This is the end result that we want, and anything else is undesirable and we will not settle for. It's going to happen this way. We just have to convince people that it has to end up happening this way. So what you do is you guide thought and action into decision making that ends up how you wanted it to begin with. This is accomplished by manipulating consciousness into a circular pattern of thought and action. So again, it's a manipulation of consciousness. It's ultimately about mind control. The synthetic solution to these conflicts cannot be introduced unless those being manipulated take a side that will advance the predetermined agenda. The agenda is already predetermined. We just need to create a synthetic conflict to make this come into manifestation the way we have it originally planned and designed. So, this is Hegel's dialectic. And it is not so much that Hegel is an evil person in his own right. This is another perversion. How chaos sorcery is used as an example of the Hegelian dialectic is it's a modified version of this dialectic for a dark purpose, for manipulation. The researcher David Icke has called this problem, reaction, solution. And it's a great term for it because it describes it perfectly. You create the problem to get a reaction, and then you offer the solution. The solution was already predetermined. But I like to call it chaos, confusion, opportunity, because I think it more accurately describes what the process that's taking place is really about. You want to create chaos. You need a chaotic situation created, because the reaction that you're looking for is confusion, not knowing what to do or how to act appropriately to the situation. Once confusion enters the mix, you have fear-based consciousness. So the person is willing to accept all kinds of limitations and control to go back to order. And therefore, that's your opportunity to bring in your predetermined solution and get them to go along with what you originally wanted. David Rockefeller described the Hegelian dialectic perfectly. He said, "We are on the verge of global transformation. All we need is the right major crisis, and the nations will accept the new world order." And it's not the light one that he's talking about. This was the major crisis that they introduced. The events of 9/11, 2001 was an example of the modified Hegelian dialectic. It was an example of chaos sorcery. It was an occultic ritual of human sacrifice that involved three major examples of occultic symbology and ideology in the work to create the synthesis that they were looking for. And those three occult schools or occult ideologies that were employed on that day, the symbolism of which was employed on that day, was Kabbalah, Tarot, and Freemasonry. Now, before we get into any confusion at all, I want to state emphatically that I do not believe that any of these systems are evil in and of themselves. It is how occult sciences are used, occult knowledge is used by the practitioner to what end that determines whether they're wielded for good or evil. So it is not these practices or these systems that are of knowledge that are evil in any way. They are simply knowledge, and it is how they are used. Let's get that straight right off the bat. So, these three systems of occult knowledge all encode within them the understanding of human psychological makeup and human consciousness. And the ritual of 9/11 is ultimately about the destruction of that knowledge and keeping the truth down, keeping our awareness down, destroying our awareness, destroying consciousness. So we're going to look at some examples of this occultic iconography and symbolism that was used on that day. The most glaring example of which is in tarot. This is the tarot image known as the Tower. It's a card that represents the end of an old way of things and the birth of a new way of things. It's the destruction of something that is old and worn down and the building of something new in its place. One thing is being cleared to make way for something to be put up in its place. Okay? So that's the Tower. It is depicted as being struck by a bolt of lightning, on fire, with people toppling out of the windows. And that is exactly what we saw on the day of 9/11/2001. We saw towers that were struck by forces. They were on fire, and people were leaping from the windows. So clearly the occultic symbology of this particular tarot card was employed on that day. Whether this be totally by design or it be synchronicity, I'll leave that up to the audience to decide. But one of the main things we have to understand how this ritual went into effect is that two buildings did not collapse in New York City. 3 buildings came down on that day in New York City alone. Many people still do not know this or understand it, amazingly, because the mainstream media only showed the collapse of this building here to the right only one time and never really showed it again, unless you go on the internet and search for the video of the collapse of World Trade Center number 7. Some people are still unaware that a 3rd building came down at 5:20 p.m. on that day. So we have to understand first that not only the Twin Towers collapsed into their own footprint, but so did Building 7, a 47-story steel, concrete and steel reinforced building, collapsed into its own footprint in approximately 6.5 seconds at 5:20 p.m. on 9/11/2001, when no plane had struck it. So I'm not here to argue the physics of 9/11. I'm not here to even talk about any of the aspects of the how part of 9/11, the physics or the how it happened. I'm much more interested in using my time to discuss the why and the implications of the occultic symbology employed in what I consider a dark occult ritual, a ritual that embodied the modified Hegelian dialectic. And so the first thing to understand is 3 towers came down, 3 pillars, if you will, came down on 9/11, not 2. The first occult system that I'm going to look at in relation to 9/11 is Kabbalah. Kabbalah is an ancient Semitic form of occultism. Judaism takes some of its roots from Kabbalah, and this is the main symbolic structure, or this main symbolic icon of Kabbalism. It is known as the Sephirotic tree of life. This is known as the ladder to God. Okay? The levels that go up in consciousness to God. And there are 10 of these spheres on the tree. If you count them, there are 10 total. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They're known as, these spheres are known as Sephirot. So the 10 Sephirot comprise the tree of life. Now in the books that describe this symbol, the Sephirotic tree, they're the Zohar and the Sefer Yetzirah. They look at it as that there are only 10 Sephirot. There are not 9 and there are not 11. This is specifically worded into these books. To speak of there as being any more or less Sephirot is considered like a blasphemy in Kabbalah, because there are only 10. So this is where part of the name, the name of the ritual comes from. Not 9, not 11, but yet we have the ritual happens on 9/11. And we'll talk about the occult significances of the numerology as well when we explore that. But in Kabbalah, 9 and 11 are considered blasphemies against the 10 Sephirot, if you speak of there as being any less than 10 or any more than 10. And we also see that the symbolic numbers, the numbers of these buildings are symbolic when we relate the ritual to Kabbalah, because the buildings that came down were the Tower 1, which is the male tower. Okay? It has a phallic symbol on top. This is Tower 1 in the numbering system of the World Trade Center. The feminine tower is tower number 2. And then this building is World Trade Center 7. So if we add them together, we get 1 plus 2 plus 7, and that equals 10. So we see there are 10 Sephirot. The building numbers total 10. So they're bringing down the 10 in the buildings, and they're bringing down symbolically the 10 Sephirot. You see, in the Sephirot, there are 3 pillars, 3 columns. You have this left-hand path known as the path of severity. You have the right-hand path that is known as the path of mercy. Again, these are corollaries to the Freemasonic pillars. This would be the pillar of mercy, which is Joachim. This is the pillar of severity, or Boaz. And then you have the path of mildness, or the path of will. Will to ascend in consciousness. This sphere representing base consciousness, and this sphere representing cosmic consciousness. Without going into very deep explanations of what each Sephirot represents, just understand that this middle pillar is the synthesis between these two. This represents too much male aspect or control. This could be too much capitulation to control. You can look at it that way, with this path being severity, this path being mercy. You could look at it as this path is not being a controller and also not being a slave. It is not being a dominator nor capitulating to domination. Therefore, the middle way, as it is called in Buddhism, the unification of male and female, the chemical wedding. It is the ascension from base consciousness through connection with conscience, the heart chakra, and attaining cosmic consciousness or higher level awareness, represented as the crown Sephirot. See, if you collapse these in, right? If you were to take these 3 levels and collapse them in right into the middle pillar to bring these dual aspect Sephirot into one, you would see that this really represents the chakra system. the 7 chakras. You would have the base chakra, the sacrum chakra. These two comprise the solar plexus chakra, the heart chakra. These two comprise the throat chakra. These two comprise the third eye chakra, and that comprises the crown chakra. So there's the 7 chakras. All right? And we see that that would be on the middle pillar, and it would contain 7 chakras. And again, the middle pillar here is building 7. All correlates perfectly. Here are the chakras representing the 7 planets. Up the middle pillar, the spinal column, the raising of the Kundalini energy up the spine and to the top of the head. From down here, the farthest out from the sun until we get up to the solar mind. And the earth being the heart chakra of the system. The earth and moon right in the middle. It would be the 4th of the 7 chakras. And that's what's ultimately being brought down. The consciousness is being destroyed and leveled by the leveling of these towers. Okay, so that's Kabbalah. That's the Kabbalistic aspect of the destruction of the World Trade Center buildings, the 3 pillars of the World Trade Center. The second occultic tradition, tarot, we see again the columns of Jachin and Boaz. Now, see, they're reversed in this example. They're the same way that they are in the Kabbalistic Sephirotic tree of life. But this is the male pillar, the light pillar, the pillar of mercy. This is the male pillar because you're looking at the entrance of the temple. See, in the Freemasonic tracing board that we discussed, the light pillar is on this side because you're on the outside of the temple walking in. In this example, you're inside the temple looking toward the outside, and the goddess is seated in the temple and she's veiled from the outside. So if you were to picture yourself walking in from behind her, right, and she's veiled, the Jachin pillar would be to your left. And that is the male pillar, and here we see the male pillar with the phallic symbol. The feminine pillar, see, it's on her right side. This one's on her left side. So you have the feminine pillar, which would represent Boaz. The masculine pillar here would represent Jachin. The middle pillar represents the goddess. Again, it's a sacrifice of the goddess. Once again, we see it happening. Here we see she's the moon goddess. She has the cross on her chest, the cross of the sun, that she carries within, that she gives birth to. Here we see that the Sephirotic tree is behind her, because Tarot, Kabbalah, and Freemasonry are aspects of occultism that must be studied in conjunction with each other to fully understand them. The goddess holds the book of truth, the Torah, the law, the truth, and it is veiled by her cloak because no one knows how the story ends. The future is still to be written. So, in ancient goddess worship traditions, this goddess was known as Tara, T-A-R-A. And this is why, as a result of this ritual, we have a war on terror. But see, it's said, when it's said quickly, it morphs, and the word phonetically becomes terror. The war on terror. The war on the goddess, the war on the sacred feminine, the war on our emotional feminine aspect, to shut down conscience and to simply follow orders, to do whatever we are commanded to do, to simply follow orders without conscience being involved. The sacrifice of the goddess, care, conscience, the sacred feminine principle of the individual. So, again, this middle pillar is the most important. It is the synthesis between the masculine and feminine energies, the other two pillars. So the third pillar is the the principle of truth, because another name for this goddess in Egyptian tradition was Ta'urt. And Ta'urt's name kind of phonetically morphed until it became Taruth. And this is where we get the word truth out of. Phonetically, the word truth comes from a derivation of this goddess's name. So she is the goddess of truth. Now this is why there is a 9/11 truth movement, because they took too big of a chance in completing the ritual when no plane had hit it. See, a plane was more likely than not scheduled to hit that building, or something was scheduled to hit that building, whether you believe it's planes or whatever you believe actually struck, or the force that was used to bring down those buildings, to me is irrelevant. The buildings did disintegrate. They were brought down, okay? And whether you believe it's controlled demolition or even a more exotic technology is irrelevant as far as I'm concerned. The buildings were brought down, and that's the main thing. And the middle pillar, which represents the goddess, it represents truth, it represents the path to higher consciousness, the unification of the masculine and feminine principles of consciousness within the individual, are being destroyed. Ritualistically, symbolically, we're destroying the sacred feminine. We're destroying care. We're destroying conscience. We're destroying consciousness. We're destroying truth. Okay, that's what the ritual is about. And that is why Building 7 had to be brought down. Something went awry in the plan. Whatever was supposed to happen physically to that building didn't happen when it was really scheduled to happen, because clearly these buildings were wired with explosives well in advance of the actual ritual taking place, because that, explosions did happen from within the building and no one could have wired them on that day. So something happened and they could not take it down as they wanted to, but they would not leave the pillar up. Because if they left it there, it would symbolically represent that the will still stands. The will to ascend in consciousness. It would symbolically represent that the truth still stands. That the goddess still stands. And they could not do that. They had to complete the symbolic interpretation of this mass ritual by bringing the middle pillar down, even if nothing had appeared to strike it, and that's why they brought it down at the end of the day. So that is the tarot aspect of it, and how the goddess ties into it. It is a symbolic sacrifice of the sacred feminine, of the goddess, once again. And now a clear example here of the three pillars that we've already seen in the Freemasonic tracing board. Again, the masculine or solar pillar of Joachim, the feminine or lunar pillar of Boaz, and then the pillar of Jacob, Jacob's ladder, the middle pillar, the one that gets you through the stargate. Okay, it gets you to the all-seeing eye, right? The all-seeing eye, directing the entire operation. Right? Takes you past that, through the stargate, to the realm where the true light is at, the intelligent principle of the universe. And this middle pillar is the synthesis between these two. So this is thesis, this is antithesis, 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 and this is synthesis. That's the Hegelian dialectic. You are combining thesis with its antithesis to create the synthesis that you are looking for. And that is the ladder to higher consciousness, to higher ground, so to speak, from which you can see the entire game board. You can see the whole floor of the house, as they call it in Freemasonry. You're seeing it from a higher level perspective, and from that, a controller can play two sides off against each other. See, the one who achieves this level, the highest ground, the third pillar, the middle pillar, really sees things that one in base consciousness from the lower perspective, the dual perspective, cannot see things from. So they can be easily played off like a puppet master playing off two puppets on strings against each other. So that's how the Hegelian dialectic works, and that's exactly how they used this event. They're playing off two sides against each other, the Christian nations against the Muslim nations, when in fact, those who want the synthesis created the whole thing. They orchestrated the entire thing. And they got their synthesis, rushing off into wars with countries that really did not have anything to do with the events of that day, because it was a highly orchestrated occultic event controlled by the hidden sorcerers from behind the scenes, and this entire operation was directed from that all-seeing eye, the Pentagon. So bringing down the middle pillar at the end here could represent, well, once a puppet master climbs up to a higher level to control two sides against each other, he has to destroy his ladder so no one can come up to reach him where he's at to discover that he's the one pulling the strings. See, in that symbolic context, that's why they destroy the middle pillar there. So in any context, it works. To understand also in Freemasonry, Hiram Abiff is a representation of truth or conscience. Right? He is the middle pillar here. He is the grand architect of Solomon's temple, the greater architect. Hiram, king of Tyre, being the lesser architect, representing the square. Hiram Abiff represents this G in the middle, the grand architect. He is the grand architect for Solomon, who represents the compass on the Masonic compass and square. So he is also a manifestation of the truth that is the synthesis between the male and female aspects. See, and he's wearing a blindfold. Truth is blind. And again, it could symbolize an initiate who is initially blind, and then he gradually becomes the all-seeing eye through his ascent to the higher level of awareness. He begins on the floor of the house, blind to the light. He ends up at the all-seeing eye. Again, a symbolic understanding of consciousness as a journey from darkness into light. And this, again, is a representation of these pillars are a representation of the Temple of Solomon. And the original Temple of Solomon is the Giza complex. These pyramids are the mystery tradition's embodiment of the temple in man. That's what they were representing then. And the buildings in New York City are a rebuilding of this symbolic temple in New York City. Just like they were built in Giza, like the Temple of Solomon was built in Jerusalem, and then it was razed to the ground, and another version was built. It was rebuilt in New York City symbolically, and then it was destroyed again. And now they're planning on building another Temple of Solomon on the ground where the World Trade Center was destroyed. But they're doing it in a very different way this time, which we'll understand when we get to that slide. But see, Hiram Abiff, the ritual of becoming a Master Mason is about Hiram Abiff's ritual murder. And he says that he refuses to give the secrets of Freemasonry. He refuses to give the secret word of the Master Mason. He says, I will not give it to these ruffians who are accosting me. They want to know the word without doing the work. So he is ultimately slain by these ruffians for not giving the word, but he only tells them that you'll know the word of the Master Mason when the temple is rebuilt. This is a symbol that the temple in man, the brain, is ultimately in a state of total disrepair. It's been destroyed through manipulation and control and taking people's consciousness down to lower and lower levels and just completely being conditioned and accepting falsities as truths and refusing to accept truths as what is. So Hiram Abiff, as a representative and a servant of truth, refuses to capitulate to domination or become a dominator, and he is slain ritualistically for it. This is a representation of the aspect of consciousness that is base consciousness being slain and it being reborn through a connection to conscience as the widow's son. See, the widow's son is who Hiram-Abiff is. And this is the son, again, of the limbic brain, the mother aspect, the feminine aspect, who does not have a male counterpart because the reptile complex, the base brain, has been put into check by our intuitive side and our conscience. So then the male child of proper moral action, the unified neocortex, is born of the widow, the mother without the father or the virgin birth. It's the Christ story retold in a different way. The widow's son is born. The unified neocortex bears the person of proper moral action because they're being born of the intuitive feminine part of the brain, and the male dominator reptilian part of the brain has fallen away, he's fallen dead. Okay, so that's what the story of Hiram-Abiff is about. And he's saying to the ruffians, those in base consciousness who threatened to kill him for not giving the secrets of Freemasonry, you'll know the word when the temple here is rebuilt. And the word, the lost word of Freemasonry is equilibrium. That is the lost word. Because equilibrium is what we're striving for between the hemispheres of our brain and the masculine and feminine polarities that are indwelling within us. So they have to come to a state of equilibrium, and then the temple will be rebuilt. The brain will operate in global coherence across both brain hemispheres, and the third eye will be opened, and cosmic consciousness will be awakened. That is what this story is about, and that is what the ritual murder of Hiram-Abiff is about. And we'll keep that in mind when we understand that there is a new temple being built on the ruins of the old temple in New York City. Again, the complex of the World Trade Center is a symbolic representation of the original Temple of Solomon, the pyramid complex at Giza. Rebuilt in Washington, D.C., here we see the 3 pillars at Giza, 2 extremely large towers or pillars, and 1 small one. And we see it rebuilt here, the 2 large towers and then the one that is less than half of the size of the other 2. This sphere here is a representation of the Sphinx, okay, at the base of these columns. So these columns are also a symbol of the Babylonian gold-headed man depicted in the dream of Nebuchadnezzar in the book of Daniel, a prophetic book in the Bible. The gold-headed man represents centralized authority, pharaonic rule, or total hegemony, the unquestioned global ruler, the one world order, the church and state unified in the head of gold. And as dynasties went on, power diminishes. It goes through the Silver Age, then it goes into the Bronze Age, and eventually you have the separation of church and state. And you have the iron legs of the separation of church and state, and then you eventually get to the clay feet if you study this symbology in Daniel. And it's understanding how power is amassed and eventually through time it is diminished until they're trying to get back from this level to this level. And that is what the Dark New World Order would be. The destruction of the 2 pillars and the combining of them into one centralized authority, one world state and religion. That's what the New World Order ultimately is about, the Dark New World Order. So they're destroying these 2 iron legs. They're destroying the iron legs of the Babylonian gold-headed man to try to get back to one centralized authority of church and state. These pillars could be seen symbolically as church and state being destroyed. So where do we see the concepts of church and state? We see them in tarot on the death card of the major arcana. So we see the rider, death, on the white horse, coming with the flag, the black flag that has the inverted pentagram on it, the destruction of spirit. He is running down a king, and he's getting ready to run down a pope or a priest. So this is the ruler of state, this is the ruler of church or religion, and he's running them both down, destroying church and state. And you see in the background the two pillars with the setting sun in the background. The light going out from the world between the two columns. Highly symbolic. This is a representation of the new temple that they're building. In place of where the two pillars stood, they're planning on erecting one. One from where the two stood. The thesis and antithesis destroyed, the synthesis is created. The phallic symbol, the one male phallic symbol, erected in place where the symbols of church and state symbolically once stood. You know, obviously they weren't buildings that really represent that, but they're symbolic analogs to these concepts. And putting the one pillar up in the place where the two stood is the rebuilding of the destroyed Temple of Solomon in New York. The sun and the moon, and now only the sun, or phallic symbol, the male tower, remains. That is what 9/11 was about. 9/11, incidentally, the Freedom Tower is what that building is going to be called, and it's scheduled for completion in the year 2012. I'm sure to correlate with other dark prophecies of apocalypse or Armageddon, and which isn't what I see 2012 as being at all. I see it really being the birth of consciousness, because they're not able to put consciousness down. Their ritual failed. There is hope in the fact that the Building 7 stood, and they had to bring it down, and essentially screwed up the entire thing by really making people come online and understand that this was an inside job and this was an occult ritual, by bringing down that middle pillar when nothing had hit it. So that was the ultimate mistake in this whole ritual enactment, and as far as I'm concerned, they did not fulfill the agenda that they were trying to fulfill by this ritual being enacted. Instead, they initiated a great awakening within the human population. As the researcher Michael Tessarian is fond of saying, did 9/11 shake us up, or did it? So now, just as we did with the reverse of the Great Seal on the back of the $1 bill, I'm going to examine the gematria, the occultic numerology involved in the 9/11 event. These are the numbers of the three flights that struck these three buildings. The North Tower was struck by Flight 11, the South Tower was struck by Flight 175, and the Pentagon was allegedly struck by Flight 77. Now, there is another flight that was involved on that day that crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania by an unknown act of will, shall we say. And this was Flight 93, and it is my contention that Flight 93 was indeed headed for World Trade Center number 7, Building 7 of the Trade Center, not to Washington, D.C., as is claimed. And this, to me, makes much more sense than it heading toward Washington, D.C., because I believe it was there to strike a building that had already been wired to allegedly collapse, as the two twin towers were, and that was Building 7. And the flight not making it to that building meant that they had to make a decision about whether to pull that building or to allow it to stand, and we know what they chose. So I'm going to place 93 over Building 7, and at first this would seem like a very arbitrary arrangement of numbers, and that these numbers don't have any commonalities to them, until we begin to perform gematria upon them. And then we see a very clear pattern emerge. So, I'm going to leave 11 as is for now, and I'm going to reduce or add these two numbers together and get a total. So 9 plus 3 is 12. 1 plus 7 plus 5 is 13, and 7 plus 7 is 14. So now, the floor planes, we have a clear pattern. We have the pattern 11, 12, 13, and 14. And we could further reduce those down to one digit. We add 1 plus 1 and we get 2. 1 plus 2 is 3. 1 plus 3 is 4. 1 plus 4 is 5. So we have the pattern 2, 3, 4, 5. When we add those together, 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5, we get the total 14. And again, there's that symbolic number again that totals 5, that is about the 5 elements: earth, air, water, fire, and spirit. But it is the separation of them, the 1 and the 4, the spirit and then the 4 elements. This is the 14th level of that pyramid, where the light is at, the 13 levels of stone, and then the light at the top, the 14th level. So look at the 9/11 date, 9/11/2001. You add up all of these numbers, 9 plus 1 plus 1 plus 2 plus 1 in 2001, and you get 14 again. So not only is it the date, it's the powers that did the act. Okay? The 4 planes totaled to 14. Their digits all totaled make 14. So the powers that performed this act are the 14. And this correlates with the 14th level of this pyramid, or the illuminated ones, the sorcerers behind the scenes that are manipulating the events of the world. So we have this arrangement on the building: 77 at the Pentagon, 11 at the North Tower, 175 at the South Tower, 93 at Building 7. If we add the 2 planes that struck these towers together, we get the number 186. 175 plus 11 is 186. Now, these are the planes that struck the twin towers, the North and South Tower. What if we equally distribute that number between the 2 buildings by dividing it into 2? 186 divided by 2 is 93. So there is 93, 93, 93 on every building, and we've already seen what 93 represents. It represents the will to ascend out of illusion, out of base consciousness, and into cosmic awareness, or higher levels of consciousness. 93 is the number of willpower and of love. It is essentially the same force, the force that expands consciousness, love, or will to ascend, to put what we think and feel into action, to use our willpower. So we are left with only 2 numbers that symbolically represent the events of this day: 77 and 93. And these are 2 extremely significant occult numbers in numerology, because they represent 2 completely different concepts. And we have to look at these 2 numbers as they relate to a third number, the number 777, which we've already seen is the number of God, or completion, or perfection. We saw that earlier. The 7 chakras, the 7 planets that can be seen with the naked eye, tripled for the 3 aspects of consciousness, unified as 1 to total 3. Again, it's the number of God, the number of completion, or the number of perfection. 93 in relation to this number 777. Just like 777 totals 21, which totals 3, 93 totals 12, which reduces to 3. So they equal the same thing, which means they equal the same. They mean the same thing. So love is 93. Will is the concept of 93. It is the number of ascension. So all of these ideas are the same. They mean the same thing. In gematria, when numerological additions total the same value, the words that they represent really mean the same thing. So 93 is 777, is love, is will, is ascension, is God, is completion, is perfection. These are all the same concept. The number 77 is very significant. It is the 14. It is the dark aspect of that light in the triangle, the ego, the all-seeing eye that is identified with building that pyramid upward, the physical form, the physical world, ruling, control, sorcery. It is the force of chaos. The number 77 represents chaos in all forms of occultism. It represents the sorcerer. It is the sorcerer's number. And it is the number of the beast in disguise. Why is that? Because if you fail, even if you succeed in one of the other two aspects of consciousness, in thought and emotion but not action, or in thought and action but no emotion, in the example of a sorcerer, has no emotion, or even in emotion and action but with no thought, that is base consciousness. That is the beast. You have not arrived at the 777. You have only arrived at the 77, which is 2/3 of completion. Or it is 14 out of 21, 2/3, right? And this reduces in decimal to 0.666, repeating. So it is the number of the beast in disguise. The sorcerer is the beast. And this is encoded on the 3rd degree tracing board of Freemasonry. Here you see the tools that slayed Hiram Abiff. He is finally struck with the mallet, representing ignorance, the light going out, the third eye being struck, put into the coffin, okay? The coffin is the spirit, where Hiram Abiff, the hey in Hebrew, representing 555, Hiram Abiff's number. He is in his coffin because he is the spirit, he is the truth, he is the light, and he is the skull and bones is placed on top of the coffin, symbolic of the sorcerer. The sorcerer who conquers his spirit so that the skull, cleverness, thought and cleverness, left brain cleverness, plus the will to act, reigns over the spirit. The sorcerer has cleverness, he has the will to put his cleverness into action, but he has no conscience. The conscience is entombed in that coffin. And an individual such as this is headed west. They are headed toward the realm of darkness and death, to the west, not toward the realm of light, to the east. And here symbolically is the sprig of acacia, and that represents the hope of resurrection in Freemasonry. So this is the hope that one who has destroyed their own spirit through their usage of their intellect and their will to act in an egoic fashion may indeed still be able to resurrect the spirit and come to a place of moral uprightness and conscience. So that is what this tracing board represents, and it is the 3rd degree tracing board. It is saying you may now be initiated into some of the mystery, into some of the knowledge, but you must use that with spirit intact and not use it as a sorcerer. Otherwise you are headed west and you are not headed toward the true realm of light, which lies to the east. And I think that's a great allegorical explanation for morality. And we see, therefore, that the two numbers that this ritual reduces down to is 77 and 93, and the positions that they are in is all telling. The purpose of the ritual is so that the sorcerers that are consider themselves the all-seeing eye of consciousness, okay, are destroying others' ability to find truth, to give birth to conscience, and to rise in consciousness. And they're destroying that ladder to the higher realms. of consciousness. Or if we replace 77 and 93 with their symbolic analog, 77 the number of the beast in disguise, 93 another variant for 777 the number of God. Look at what this ritual is really about symbolically. It is about the beast reigning above God, the beast becoming God and destroying God. That's what it's ultimately about. That's how dark this ritual really is. It is about the ego and illusion conquering the spirit and conquering higher consciousness. We can see that it is encoded in the date itself. 9/11 reduces to 9/2. We're just adding the two ones together. And there we have symbolically the entire ritual encapsulated in the name. 9/11 is 92. See, it is not 93. It's one short of love, of ascension, of will, of God. It is falling short of the divine. That's what this whole event was about. That the idea that human will is falling short, and now the time of the beast is upon us. See, 92 out of 93, falling short of love, will, ascension, God, reduces to 11 out of 12, which reduces to 2 out of 3, which again is the number of base consciousness. It is the number of the beast when it is reduced to its decimal format. And that's what the whole ritual of 9/11 was ultimately all about. It is about the destruction of the ladder to God, bringing down the Kabbalistic tree of life, the 10 Sephirot, 1, 2, and 7, bringing them down to destroy the ladder with which we can use to ascend in consciousness. It is about the destruction of the truth and the goddess, a human sacrifice ritual. Those people were ritualistically sacrificed in this evil doing. And it is about the destruction of the sacred feminine, of care, of truth. Another ritual to immolate the goddess of care. The goddess that represents the earth. Terra. Again, you hear politicians say, if you are not with us, you are with the terrorists. Tara, the goddess, the Mother Earth. Terra is the name for earth. If you're not with us, you're with those who side with the earth and the Mother Goddess, right? And it was also used to create the Hegelian dialectic, the bringing down of thesis and antithesis to create synthesis, the sorcerer's middle pillar. That's what the event of 9/11/2001 was all about. An occult ritual to bring about the dark, modified version of the Hegelian dialectic. Chaos, confusion, opportunity. General Douglas MacArthur talked about the Hegelian dialectic. He said, our government has kept us in a perpetual state of fear, kept us in a continuous stampede of patriotic fervor with a cry of grave national emergency. Always there has been some terrible evil at home or some monstrous foreign power that was going to gobble us up if we did not blindly rally behind it. Create the chaos. Get the confused, fearful reaction, and then that's your opportunity to offer the solution that you had in waiting. Hermann Goering perfectly understood this, one of the highest ranking officials of the Third Reich, the Nazi regime. He said, naturally the common people don't want war. Neither in Russia, nor in England, nor for that matter in Germany. That is understood. But after all, it is the leaders of the country who determine the policy. And it is always a simple matter to drag the people along, whether it is a democracy, a fascist dictatorship, a parliament, or a communist dictatorship. Voice or no voice, the people can always be brought to the bidding of the leaders. That is easy. All you have to do is tell them they are being attacked. and denounced the peacemakers for lack of patriotism and exposing the country to danger. It works the same in any country. And that is what we saw on 9/11. Except it wasn't just telling the people that they were attacked. This is what Hitler did. Hitler burned his own Reichstag building, the German parliamentary building in Germany, and he blamed it on the communists, even though his Gestapo really did the fire. They lit the fires at the Reichstag, and he blamed it on the communists as an act to assert more political power and be appointed as Supreme Chancellor. Goering was describing the Hegelian dialectic exactly. Benjamin Franklin made this statement: those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. And we have neither as a result of going along with this witch hunt and this hunting for the boogeyman that perpetuated 9/11, because Middle Eastern terrorists did not do this event. It was a staged, orchestrated, occult ritual that has nothing to do with Islamic fundamentalism whatsoever. Voltaire said that those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. If you go along with what simply is not true, you can be led into any number of atrocious actions. And really, that's what the ritual was all about, to keep us in a perpetual state of fear so that we are easier to control. And that's what the whole fear of terrorism and the terror alert system is all about. See, just like Hitler burned his parliamentary building, we had our Reichstag fire called the 9/11 event. And it's just about an attack on civil liberties and our rights and our right for freedom of speech, and just to curtail all the God-given rights that we already possess as an attack on our personal sovereignty. And people will be willing to give up more personal sovereign rights if their consciousness is shut down through fear. They bought into the fear, and now we're going off in other lands that really had nothing to do with this event, and we're waging war and killing millions of innocent people as a result of this total fraudulent staged event. And these are the atrocities that we're committing because we've believed in this absurdity. The murder of children, torture, now seen as acceptable in many circles, absolutely reprehensible actions perpetrated upon people that do not deserve to be treated like animals, which is what they're doing to many of the prisoners that they're holding in oftentimes secret prison camps. And it's just a further perpetuation of suffering and fear into the world that is a self-perpetuating cycle and creates more and more of the same dynamic: fear, disorder, chaos. That's what the whole event was about. Encapsulated in the 33rd degree of the 33rd degree of the Order of Freemasonry is this symbol, the double-headed eagle, which represents he who sees the past and the future, because ultimately the same force is controlling both and directing both. And it's about order out of chaos. Deus meum quae jus is a Latin phrase that means God and my right. God and my right, like the divine right of kings. And ordo ab chaos, another emblem of the 33rd degree, chaos, sorcery. Our brand of order out of our brand of chaos. Now, there is a positive interpretation of this emblem and of the phrase ordo ab chaos. Order does indeed arise from chaotic situations when you look at putting water into a vessel and taking it from one level up to a higher level. That is the way consciousness ascends. It has to be a chaotic event, but then it comes up to a higher level, and then it maintains equilibrium and order again. So that is a way of seeing this principle as in a positive way. But in this event, certainly dark occultists manipulating sorcerers are orchestrating this event as an example of chaos sorcery, chaos magic, to bring about their Hegelian dialectical order out of the chaotic events that they themselves orchestrated. And that is the final method of manipulation. So